Welcome to Embracing New Life. On this episode, and probably multiple episodes, we have a colleague of ours, Scott Dawley. He's a counselor at New Life Resources, and he'll be joining us for this episode or multiple episodes. Welcome, Scott.
Yeah, welcome, Scott.
Thanks, guys.
Scott, I wonder if we could start today just you describing a little bit about your journey to become a licensed professional counselor, because I understand that was not your undergraduate degree.
No, not even close. But what I do now is, in a lot of ways, very similar to what I did with my undergrad. My undergrad degree was electrical engineering. I went to UW-Milwaukee. I powered through my 4-year program in 6 years because I had a lot of fun in college. And engineers, what do? We come up with problem statements. We assess what the materials and resources are we have at our disposal, and we find solutions to the problems. That's what engineers do. And so I worked in the field of engineering and computers for 30 plus years. And for a number of reasons, I was just like, okay, I think I've done everything I can do here. Because I was kind of doing the same thing over and over again. And in 30 plus years in the computer field, one of the things I definitely learned is don't trust computers. Because they will find very clever, creative ways to lose things that are important to you and make your life miserable and more complex. So around 16 years ago, my wife went back into working in a career after being a full-time mom, and she decided to go into mental health counseling. So she has a LPC degree and an LPC license, and worked for Rogers Hospital out in Oconomowoc. And I got to go with her to the annual employee appreciation dinners and the fundraising galas, and I got to hear testimonies about changed lives that were coming about as a result of mental health treatment that they were receiving there. And there's another side of me that's very pastoral in nature, and I've done some pastoral work in churches, and the work that I heard coming out of Rogers, coming from what I'm hearing from my wife, was very pastoral. And so really it was very much through her career change and what I got to see through at Rogers that helped me say, yes, this is something I could really, really sink my teeth into.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so you've been a licensed professional counselor now for many years. And do you find that it has both the problem-solving engineering type and the pastoral care features as well? It's both?
Oh yeah, it's both. I do tend to get a disproportionate number of the engineers that come to New Life, and I'm fine with that. And what's really fun is with those folks, we get techie in our conversations, and I say, oh, is that like a rotating magnetic field about a shaft of a motor? Yeah, Scott, actually it is. And so we get kind of geekish, and so with those folks, I have a really good connection. But then with others, I'm able to do a little bit of both. I mean, because it is problem solving. Help me understand what it is you're looking for, what you want to get out of life right now, and why you're not getting that. And then let's come up with a problem statement and a solution for it. So it's both. And then there's other people to the pastoral side who just want to hear that they're okay. And they want to connect their faith with their mental health. And they want to, and they're living lives where outwardly they're not really living what their faith would have. And they're like, how do we get there? And then that's the very pastoral work, assuring people, affirming who they are, talking about how God loves them, and bringing scriptural teachings into the session, and people really enjoy that. Now, we all know that sometimes we get people who don't want to hear that Bible stuff, and so that's fine. We can still speak truth to them, and they'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah. What I appreciate about what you're saying is I think it hits at a core question that a lot of people have about counseling. They typically will think of it in terms of it's like a one size fits all, and it's like but it very much is a tailored response to the individual person that you're meeting with. If you're an engineer, let's talk in engineer terms. If you're a pastor, let's talk more pastoral. If you're not wanting to talk about spirituality at all, okay, let's meet you at where you're at, and that's really how, a healthy, good counselor should function in counseling, is meeting people where they're at and helping them move forward towards the goals that they have.
Yeah. And as we've all experienced, there is no one size fits all, because every day, all three of us, every day is different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gee, I've heard it all. Nope. That's one thing we've all learned from this, is that every person who walks in the door is going to have a unique story, and we have to develop a unique approach to meet them where they're at.
For sure. Yeah.
That's right. And that's really a privilege to hear these stories.
Yes.
And then to have that responding to the uniqueness of a person created in God's image.
For sure.
What a privilege we have.
And sometimes, as they're on their way out the door, I'll put my hand on their shoulders. I'm going to say, "Thank you for allowing me on this journey with you."
Yes.
And it really is an honor and a privilege to be part of it.
Well, it is. As Dan has said many times in the podcast, vulnerability is risky and dangerous, and for somebody to come into a room that, and obviously the therapeutic relationship develops and it grows and you get to know each other, but, to be vulnerable like most people are in a counseling office is a dangerous, very dangerous thing, and to be able to provide that safety, like you say, is a privilege. It's just an honor to be able to sit with people and them trust, that we're going to care for them well in the midst of that vulnerability.
I will frequently get people who, as they're talking about some of their frustrations, their language might get a little salty, and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, Scott." And I'll say, "Hey, no, these walls absorb everything, and what happens in this room stays in this room,
If the couches could speak.
Yeah, right, no kidding.
But it really does highlight that we need a safe place.
Yeah.
And there are very few safe places we find in life.
Yeah.
A place where we can be heard and understood. And one of the times that's all the more important is when things are changing around us. We might use a term like transitional time or transition. But many times we're encountering people in a transition, and they're feeling vulnerable, often scared or angry or hurt or shamed, afraid. What are some things that you've found, Scott, that help have sense of safety? How do you facilitate safety when they come in transition?
Probably the number one thing I'll do with people to help them feel safe, to be authentic and vulnerable, is I remind them that we're all messy. And being messy is part of the human condition.
For sure.
It's not because they're defective. It's because they're fearfully and wonderfully made, and we're living in a weird, mixed up world. And we go through these life transitions, like we spend 25 years raising kids, and then bloop, they're all gone. Now what? Yeah. This is a weird transition. Or bloop, I taught my kids these sets of principles, and now they've adopted these different. Oh yeah, that's a common part of the human condition. So helping them to see that they are not alone in their experience, and that what they're going through is common, no less important. And that's the thing. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. No, it's still important, and it's common. And helping them feel okay about themselves really establishes, I think, a lot of trust.
Yeah, so often when it's not just me, that helps me live with it.
And this is the power of groups, right? You get in a group, you sit like Dan, we used to have the group in this room. You have a bunch of guys sitting around talking about their stuff, and I realized I got the same stuff that you got, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's not just me.
Yes, it's not just me.
Yeah, and not just the normalization, I think, too. It's helping them remember that, like, this is your first transition in this area oftentimes. So, like, why are you expecting yourself to have it all together? Like, you're learning as you go, too, like, you don't have any... You have people you can refer to that can give you wisdom and stuff like that, but this is just like kids, as they depart from home, they have to learn stuff for the first time. It's true for us as adults, too, as those new transitions come in life stages. There's just new variables that we have to learn how to live well with, so.
And I'm gonna dovetail off that. one of the other feeling safe things that I'll do, you talked about, this is the first time you've done this, okay? And it's real common for people to come in and express how disappointed and how ashamed they feel about decisions they made 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one way I'll establish safety with them is I'll say, you know what, it's really easy when we're 63 to be critical of the younger, less wise version of ourselves, isn't it? But that person back then, that 30-year younger version of you, really did the best they could.
Exactly.
And, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I see so many light bulbs going over people's heads when I share that concept with them. And it usually keeps bubbling back up to the surface.
Oh,
I remind them, okay,
Yeah.
that was the 30-year younger version of you. Let's give him a break. He did the best he could. And we'll have conversations. We'll write letters to the 30th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it helps them feel really safe.
Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, another thing that we all do to help us feel safe is maintain confidentiality. That, as you're sharing sometimes the saltiness, so to speak, that being you is safe. I'm not going to share with anyone without your permission. It's okay to take a risk, take a chance, take your mask off, take your guard down. And that is so few places in life we can do that.
Right.
Well, it gets back to other, what we've talked about in this podcast before about having an environment where we're observing, not judging.
Yes.
And it's okay to be you. Like, let's just talk about it and not feel like we have to judge anything and just describe, as you say.
Well, and to add to that, it's observing and then also sometimes climbing into the boat with them.
Yeah.
Right? And okay, let's do this. Let's talk about it. Let's both feel it. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate your moment ago, your observation that the expectation I should know what I'm doing if I've never done it before is unrealistic.
Totally.
But so many times we do transition in life into an area, sometimes I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Or even if I did see it coming, it's so different than I expected.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And what can a counselor do in those places when the person coming in, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what's going on. What can the counselor offer in those times that's helpful to the person who doesn't know what to do?
As in, this thing I'm experiencing right now was not in the 4-color glossy brochure of life.
Yeah.
Now what do I do?
It's not in my 5-year plan.
Yeah. It's not in my plan.
Well, I mean, there's a certain degree of reality therapy that we have to come back to.
Totally.
That is that, yes, we have these ideas. This is what it's going to be like. This is what it's actually like.
Yeah.
Oh, that was not up to my expectation. Well, what are our options then? Well, we can force it to happen. We can try that. That's probably not going to work real well. Or we can say, yeah, it didn't work quite the way I thought it was going to. So maybe I should just try something else. Go a different direction.
Isn't there a great element of grief work that's kind of done in this, right? Like
Yep.
that ability to, just like things aren't the way that I anticipated, or things aren't the way that they should be, or how God designed them to be, and just allowing the grief process to play itself out in a healthy way.
Lost expectations, lost hopes. We have funerals for things that die.
Yeah.
And when our expectations die, there's going to be grief.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to help a person recognize grief is actually a healthy process, uncomfortable,
For sure.
Yeah.
but it facilitates us letting go so that we have space to receive what's here.
And to transition well.
And that's how we transition well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the topic of grief, a lot of people, they've had a loved one who died or something, and if they've been in it for a while, is this going to be forever? And we can talk about how it'll never completely go away. it'll get less and less and less. And even 20 years from now, oh, gee, I miss that person.
Yep.
But it's not going to derail your life.
Uh-huh. So part of what you're helping them do is develop a realistic expectation. And a realistic expectation is not one that will always have, what's the old balloons and butterflies? Whatever that old saying.
Seashells and balloons, yeah.
Seashells and balloons. No, in a fallen world, we will encounter the pain. Even with good memories, there can be pain. But pain's not dangerous. It's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but not dangerous.
Yeah.
What are some of the life transitions that you see in your work?
Well, because I do a lot of couples work, a very common theme there is, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, just people who've been pouring their heart and souls into raising children for several decades sometimes, and that's the only real thing they had that was common with each other.
Yes.
When they were before kids, they went to the symphony together, and they had these things that they shared, and then everything became focused on the kids. And then they're gone. Now what?
Yes.
That's a huge transition.
For sure.
Other transitions would be, death of a loved one, a divorce, job loss, job change. What are some other transitions? Yeah.
There's a lot.
There's a few.
And all of those involve loss and opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when someone comes in that has had such a loss, is involved in a transition, I hear you in a problem solving. One of the ways you relate to them is in a problem solving mode.
Yeah. But problem solving, and also, in the brainstorming model, we allow ourselves to think big. We allow ourselves to think outside of the four-color glossy brochure that we thought we lived in. And so how do we do that? How do we give ourselves permission to just go and try something that's a little goofy and be okay with it? And that very often will get the creative juices flowing as far as what can I make the next 10 years of my life look like, or the second half, or whatever. Very often that also involves faith decisions and faith transitions. Again, you're focused on this enterprise of raising children and balancing checkbooks and saving in 401ks, and then it all changes, and very often people come back to a faith orientation that they held at a much younger age. But then it's not like the one they had at a younger age. It's a faith experience that's flavored with decades of life experience.
Do you find people want to talk about those things?
Constantly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some people would have the assumption, well, you can't talk about that with your counselor. That's only something you would talk about with a pastor.
Well, you got to drag it out of them sometimes and let them know that it's okay to talk about those things. But once you find out where the secret switch is and you turn it on, it flows.
Yeah. Because the faith issues are very central to how do I build my new life now. That chapter of my life is closed. Now what?
Yeah.
Faith is a big part of that.
Yeah, because you take that out of the equation, and everything we do just turns into something that's going to be temporary, and then I got to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And we're looking for something that's solid and underlies our whole life, something transcendent.
Yeah, with purpose and meaning. Because I found people who go through transitions, not all the time, but oftentimes when they're having issues, it is because their identity was tied to whatever the thing in the past was. So raising kids, I was a mom, I was a dad, as whatever. Now that is gone. I mean, it's not gone. It's changed, and so there's an element of feeling purposelessness, and so, faith provides a huge boost to your purpose and meaning and how you can be used by God in the world.
And then also identity.
Yeah.
Dan, something we used to do in the room when a new guy would come and join the
Mhm.
group. Introduce yourself without referring to your job or your family, right? Was
Yep.
that it? Yeah.
That was it.
And
what was the outcome often?
they didn't know where to go with that.
Right.
And so, and this is another big part of what I think we do here, and that is we help people whose identity is completely wrapped up in their family and their job and their 401ks and their car or whatever, and help them through the process of figuring out an identity that's more consistent with who they are instead of what they do.
Yeah.
I appreciate how you put that. Who they are instead of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And culture gives us various choices about identity, who I am.
Yeah.
And many times in culture, it's about what I want. In your work with these people, the transitions, identity, how do you conceptualize or think about how they'll find identity?
Well, very often it starts with a discussion about values. What are the things that are important to you? What are your non-negotiables? Sometimes I refer to it as a cover charge. What's your cover charge for what you're going to allow into your life to influence how you're living that life and how you're spending your time? I also have, and this helps with the identity development, I have 3 questions that hang under my whiteboard. What do you want? What's getting in the way? What are you willing to change in or about yourself to move one step closer toward what you want? And that's that third question that really digs into the identity piece. What am I willing to change in or about myself? You mean I have to?
Yeah.
Well, if there was nothing there before, yeah.
Yeah.
Or if the only thing that was there was a BMW, yeah, that's not your identity. So it's that third question that really gets that conversation rolling.
Well, and it strikes at, we talked about this in another episode with Debbie, it strikes at the heart of you have agency in life, right? Yeah, there's a lot that we can't control, but there is a role that you have to play that you can move towards active participation and not just passive, being a passive recipient of what life brings you. That question, really gets to the fundamental nature of, hey, take charge, do what you can do and understand you have limitations, but you do have agency as well.
And sometimes that starts out with something as simple as, I don't know, I'm going to come up with a silly example. Park your car in a different spot tonight, or have something for dinner you've never had before. I can do that? It starts with small things.
Yeah, for sure.
But then you build on that.
Yeah.
Hey, sometimes they just need someone to give them permission to go and try the audacious thing. Really, it's okay for me to do that? Totally. That's nothing's stopping you.
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so there's an action orientation here. You're looking to see, do some things different.
Yeah.
And in transition, there's a requirement to do things different.
So true.
But often our people, as they're facing transitions, there's a sense of being frozen.
Yeah, they're stuck.
Stuck.
Yeah.
What used to work doesn't work now.
Yeah.
Or they're afraid, fearful of making a wrong move because they've never been there before.
And then fearful of being judged if they make the wrong move and everybody sees them fall flat on their face. And then we get back to remind them that we all fall flat on our face.
Yes.
And that's a human thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So that permission giving is also a part of it. And you're not describing giving permission to destructive things.
No.
But what sometimes is lost is many times there's a lot of good ways to do something.
For sure.
Not just one.
Exactly.
Yeah. So try another one. Yeah.
Try another good one. Yes. Do you see that when people start the change process, there's probably several different courses they take, but do you see sometimes people will freeze or change is starting to happen and then they back away?
Yeah. We all have our normals. The way I explain it when I'm talking to folks is during our first 20 or 25 years of life, we learn what normal is. And then we go out and we try and recreate that normal. And then we get to that point where we're like, that didn't work so well, I want to try something different. But this has a gravitational pull to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to tend to get pulled back to our normal all on our own. Then let's throw something else in. Our family systems that we are part of that also have that same normal, they're going to be appalled that we have the audacity to go out and find our own normal. And they're going to be trying pulling us back and guilting and shaming us into that and helping people go, well, you know what? You got to let them live their normal. You're going to develop your own now. So you do get stuck.
And what are some things that you have found helpful to do with them when they're stuck? They've been making some progress and they're stuck.
Stuck in moving toward their own.
Moving towards their own goals.
Part of it comes back to the permission. Part of it comes back to an affirmation. I was going to say reassurance, not in an OCD way, but an affirmation of who they are and that the new normal they're moving toward is perfectly reasonable. For a lot of people, maybe they've got overbearing families of origin, parents, maybe they're in their 20s, 30s, still trying to live a life of their own, and letting them hear, your parents need to grow up a little bit and let you go out and do your own thing now. Oh, really? You mean I don't have to? No, you don't have to. Just keep.
It's interesting you described that, because one of the things that I learned personally as my children moved into adulthood and marriage and such, we, the generation ahead, we need to keep growing about a half a step ahead of them growing, and that they continue to grow. In my scenario, my daughter now has teenagers. I need to keep growing as I'm the parent of a parent with teenagers.
Yeah.
So that's, the transitions are normal, they're to be expected, and they're always surprising and new.
With no guarantee that it's always going to be better.
Or the outcome we want. Yeah.
Say it again, what?
Or the outcome we want.
Right, and it may be different, and
Yes.
so then it's a question of, well, am I going to go back and try and force fit the solution that I wanted, or do I just kind of need to let the stick drift by on the river and say, well, there goes that stick. I guess I got to wait for the next one, and life is going to look different.
Yeah.
It sure will. Scenarios where that's really obvious are like when a loved one dies, or when a relationship dies, like a divorce, where the transition may not have been wanted, but it's real, and it is what it is. Sometimes we sit with people in that recognition. How do we move forward when the transition isn't leading us to where we want it to lead us to?
Well, let's talk about that. I don't have that's a.
Well, I think it does start with redeveloping new expectations and goals, right? Because you have a set of goals and expectations that were tied to a certain trajectory, and now that trajectory has changed, and so you just naturally have to. Okay, well, let's it comes back to, let's brainstorm. Let's get outside the 4x4 card of what we thought it was going to be, and what can it look like now. I mean, it's not what you wanted, like you said, but it is what it is. And so what could it be? And just dream about it and help them kind of catch a hope and a vision for something new, albeit different from what they were wanting, 5 days ago. I think that's at least one part of the puzzle that you have to.
We were talking earlier about the grieving of what has been lost, but in some of these scenarios, like you're describing, it can't be how I want it to be.
Yeah.
I had a widow yesterday share she saw a sign, I wish heaven had visiting hours. And her spouse has been gone many, many years. But how do we help build the new life? It's one of the things I like about the name of the clinic. That it's not just like I got one life, I got to slug my way through it. Well, we are building a new life with a transition.
Well, and even living in Wisconsin, right? We go through seasons inevitably that come and go, that create death and destruction sometimes. But there's always a rebirth that comes out of it, So that possibility, that's probably part of it too, is the possibility of the new life that exists in this new direction that we're headed. Because a lot of people just feel hopeless because it's like it's not what I wanted,
right,
or not what I expected. And there's like, no, there can be new life in this new direction.
Different than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But it can be good.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be good. Yeah, that's powerful when you can help people see it can be good.
And couple that with, and we've heard the term radical acceptance.
Yes.
Couple that with radical gratitude.
Yes.
Let's look at those two together. Radical acceptance. Yes, that person is gone out of my life now, and I can't change it, and no amount of cajoling or crying or nothing is going to bring that person or that thing back into my life. So I just need to say that is my new reality. Couple that with radical gratitude. Okay, now that that's your new reality, what are the things around you that you can still be grateful for?
Yeah.
That you can look to and say, okay, life is still good in some ways. Not that it negates the loss.
Not at all.
Right.
In fact, I mean, they go together. I have this loss, and I have this other goodness that I'm experiencing. I can actually experience those both.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
As opposed to black and white, one or the other. Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking, how often do we help someone hold both at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a natural thing.
It's not a natural thing. We humans tend to be dichotomous, either or, black or white.
Yeah.
But here, deep pain, great loss, reality, never what I thought it was going to be going forward. Goodness, love is present. One doesn't cancel the other. And what we find, I think, as the journey continues, is being able to hold both makes the goodness all the more potent, more powerful in our life.
Yeah, I've often wondered too. I mean, this is kind of a side note, but in that same vein of like, and there's a lot of different forms of suffering. Scripture talks about suffering, but I've often wondered if that isn't part of the suffering that Christians are called to experience. Is the already not yet experience of like, we know this isn't how God designed it. We know that He has better days ahead, but we live in the inner, the in between, and there's a lot of deep suffering that occurs because we can have hope and joy, but we also have a lot of hard, sad, grief-ridden days that go together. And holding the two together, I think, is a part of the suffering that we experience as believers.
That's interesting. If we think of transitions as the space in between.
Yeah.
This is how it was, and I was kind of tooled along that pretty good.
Yeah.
And now I'm in between how it's going to be and how it was.
Yeah. Yep.
And we try and get our navigation, we try and get our bearings when we're in there.
Yeah. So I picture that sometimes we come alongside someone who's in that in between, and just being heard, being understood, starts to bring some clarity and some calmness.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are skills we can teach.
For sure.
There are perspectives we offer that shift the view a bit so they can find a place to get bearings.
Sometimes that might involve doing less or doing nothing. The value of sabbaticals, the value of solitude and silence. That's another common thing that I will work with people on.
Well,
we live in a busy brain society,
Oh,
and
yes.
so now we have busy brains, and we got our devices with us, and we don't have time to stop and think.
Constantly bombarded.
It's constant noise,
yes, it is.
and the value of turning your phone off, leaving it at home, taking a chair and go and sit in the middle of the woods somewhere, and be in God's creation and in His presence. There's so much that's healing and restorative about nature.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good reminder, especially in the midst of a transition, that sometimes the best thing to do is not press forward as fast as you can, but just slow down and stop.
Yeah.
And that's okay, you know.
To delay impulses,
Yeah.
to find a way to be in quiet.
Mm-hmm.
That's thinking.
Saint Ignatius, in his development of the Ignatian spiritual
Yes.
exercises, talked about the concept of consolation and desolation. Consolation is where we just feel a sense of peace about some intended direction or something we're going to do differently. Desolation is where it just feels really unsettled, and what Ignatius said is, when you're in that state of desolation, don't change anything. Don't go back, don't go forward, just don't, because you don't know where you're at right now.
Yeah.
And sitting and waiting and letting our minds dial down till we feel that experience of peace helps us make the next steps better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And often we need permission and then encouragement to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because society says go, go, go. That's for sure.
What about people who get stuck in their treatment? I'm sure we've all had it happen where people are coming to deal with depression or anxiety issues, and we do all the stuff that we know how to do, and they get stuck there. Call it treatment-resistant depression or anxiety or whatever. What do we tell those people? Well, sorry. How do we convey hope to them?
Mm-hmm. It is interesting with all the technology that's developed, and a lot has changed in the last years. There are still those treatment-resistant situations that we encounter. The person wants to be better, and they're not. The depression continues to torment them, etc. Mother Teresa, interestingly, appeared to have that experience.
The dark night of the soul for her whole life, pretty much, right? Yes.
Whole life. And she found meaning in it. She didn't understand why. And that is a reality that I think is really important to help people accept. There's most everything we won't understand why. But I think of that really, I'd call it a very odd story in the book of Job. That is a strange story.
Oh, yeah.
Thankfully, I don't know of it ever happening twice. But in that story, it wasn't concluded by understanding why, but understanding what. And I think sometimes we help our clients accept we don't know why. We don't know. Is it a genetic thing? Is it due to a brain injury at some point that wasn't registered? Don't know. Didn't recognize when it happened. Is it? We don't know. But our hope is not in just understanding why. How do I live well given I have this challenge? And I've seen a number of people, they're still wrestling with depression, and they find hope in their coping with depression. Their hope now isn't that I will never have another depressive moment. but their hope is in not only in this life, their hope is in, I'm going to appreciate that the sun is out today.
Mm.
When my grandchild comes over and smiles at me, I'm going to give them a hug. Very different than life's going to go the way I want it to.
Yeah.
Because we don't get that typically.
Yeah, back to gratitude.
Yes,
it's just
gratitude is so important.
yeah.
Dan, you talked about it's not always about knowing the why.
Yeah.
It's sometimes about knowing the who. Right?
Yep,
As we've
yep,
seen,
yep.
foxhole Christians, or if we remember what the churches were like after 9/11, tragedy and chaos
Yeah.
tends to drive us to God. So
Yes.
it's not about the why; it's about the who. Who's the person that I'm driving toward right now,
Yeah.
and how do I connect with him?
You know, it's intriguing with cultural transitions that are so extreme, changes that are happening all around us on so many different levels in institutions and in countries and international, all the way to inside a family. Ultimately, we're always kind of challenged with, where will I find comfort? Where do I turn? A little child usually turns to mom, dad, caretaker, whoever it is, because I need to find comfort. And in a transition, how I used to find comfort got disrupted.
Yeah.
Now, where do I find comfort? And just in my own personal journey, I'll share that my faith can't be in my institution or my government or even in my wife, who's pretty awesome.
Really awesome.
But she's one of us.
Yes.
So, where do I find comfort? I think is a question that we're always exploring, trying to answer that question. Transition just disrupts how we found it.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the cultural changes that we're in the middle of right
Yeah.
now, I've been coming back to, let us therefore fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. I think it's in Hebrews 11 or 12 or something like that.
Yes.
And that's the who. That's the who. It's ultimately not life, liberty, and happiness. And I missed a word there, but it's about who is it that we're really in connection with.
Yes.
Yeah.
My faith is not in any of these others. I have thoughts and opinions and desires, but that's not my anchor. Nor my identity.
No. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, it was a great time having you on the podcast, Scott. We appreciate you stopping by and talking with us. I'm sure we'll definitely have you on again and talk about other stuff. So appreciate you sharing.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Embracing New Life is a production of New Life Resources, a Christian counseling clinic in southeast Wisconsin, whose aim and goal since 1976 has been to provide high-quality professional counseling, psychological, and consulting services from within a Christian framework.